Hi and welcome to another VFace Fundamentals video, and in this one I'll be showing you how to use the ID maps provided with the VFace pack to control displacement on a per channel, per region basis. Okay, so in my previous video called Creating a Basic Displacement Shader in Maya and Arnold, I showed you how you can set up your displacement so that you have independent control over each 3 channels in the multi-channel map, so that you can control the displace, tertiary and micro details separately across the model, and then merge that into a sculpt displacement map that you may want to use. And the result we had here was the displacement map from the TexturingXYZ VFace pack applied correctly, and then another displacement map with sculpt detail. In this case, I just projected some TexturingXYZ logos onto him, merged into that. However, there's often going to be cases where you want more control than this, where you may want to control the level of each channel on a per region basis. And for this purpose, TexturingXYZ provides 4 ID masks with every VFace pack so that you can do this. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to apply them. So first off, let's have a look at the masks. So here we are in Photoshop, and I've got the 4 masks loaded up. This is ID mask 1, which covers the nose, cheeks and forehead. ID mask 2 covers the eyes, lips and ears. ID mask 3 covers the scalp, under the chin area of the neck and the back of the neck. And ID mask 4 covers the tip of the nose, the upper lip and the chin. We can see the divide quite clearly, but if you go into channels and select each one, then we can see the split very clearly indeed. I'm just going to show how to implement these ones for this video. However, I just want to point out that TexturingXYZ now supply an extension pack on their website. So if you go to texturing.xyz, collections, VFace add-ons, you'll find this IDs extension pack, which is really useful for even more control if you need it. There's also a makeup extension pack as well, so that you can quickly add makeup to your model. So these are really useful. They come for free, and all you need to go do is go into the website and download them, and I would definitely recommend that you do so. I'm going to start with the scene that I had before I added in the sculpt detail displacement map at the end of the previous video. So in the scene here, I have all of the head meshes and the extra meshes that were supplied in the VFace bundle, including the geometry for the eyelashes, eyebrows, eyes, and then obviously the head itself. Everything has an Arnold standard surface shader applied to it, but the head has a separate one, which is called skin. And then in the background, I have an AI skydown light with the H2I that was supplied with the TexturingXYZ VFace pack applied to it. I'm using just 2 cameras, this full one and then a closer one for previewing the details a little closer up. The only other thing that you need to be aware of is making sure that your subdivision is set up correctly. So in the attribute editor here, you want to come down to the Arnold settings and expand subdivision and make sure it's set to Cat Clark, and set your iterations on something like 5 and adaptive error to something like 2. So I'll switch back to the full one, and let's open up Hypershade and start looking at what we need to do to set up these displacement maps. So here I have my multi-channel displacement map coming in here. I have an AI subtract, which is setting the mid value to 0 correctly. And then I have an AI multiplier for global strength. After that, it's going into a layer RGBA node where I can set the different strengths for the channels. But this is where I'm going to delete from and then start again. So I shall remove that node for a start. Then what I want to do is bring in my ID maps. So again, what we can do is drag these directly into the Hypershade and it will set them up correctly for us. So let's drag them in down here and then just tidy this up slightly so that they're in order. Okay, great. So let's start with ID mask 1 here. And the first thing I want to do is look at how we mask out the multi-channel map per region. So I'm going to just move these down quickly so we have a little bit more space. And I'm going to expand the out color here so that we expose the red, green and blue channels. Throughout this video, I'm going to be using Arnold nodes rather than native Maya nodes. This is because I come from Houdini. However, you can use native Maya nodes if you prefer. What I'm trying to show you here is the principles of how we achieve this level of control within the displacement shader. So for instance, here we could use a color mask node to mask out a region that we want, but instead I'm going to use an AI multiply node. So I'll show you how I do this. I'm going to press tab and bring in an AI multiply and drop that down there. And then what I want to do is take the out color and connect it to input 1. And we can see the preview here. And then what I want to do is multiply this preview by the strength of the red channel. So I'm going to drop this down so that I expose all 3 channels, because I won't be able to put this channel into input 2 directly. So I'm going to put it into all 3 inputs here, starting with red, then into green, and then into blue. It's really important that you do plug it into all 3 channels for the mask to work correctly. Because this scene will get quite complicated, I suggest that you name things as you go. So in this instance, this is the forehead. So I'm going to call this forehead mask. And then we can move and collapse that down. And then we want to do the same for the next 2 channels. So again, let's put in an AI multiply. Connect the out color into the input 1 again and expand this. And in this case, we're going to want to take the green channel. So I will click and drag the green channel into the red, into the green, and into the blue. And we can see that down here, if I expand this slightly, that we are now isolating the nose. So let's call that nose mask and collapse that down. And then one more. For the blue channel. So again, out color from a displacement map into input 1. Expand this down, take the blue into the R channel and into the green channel and into the blue channel. And we are isolating the cheeks. So let's call that cheeks mask. And collapse that down. Okay, so that's all of my masks set up. And so now what we want to do is create a way of controlling the forehead, for instance, per channel. So I'm going to use a layer RGBA node. So I'll type in layer RGBA and drop that down there. And I'll just move these down for a moment and expand this. And expand the out color. Now, sometimes depending on your node display settings, the layer RGBA node may come in with a couple of inputs on the left, in this case it hasn't. So what I need to do is click and drag on the channel, drag it up to the input on the top left, click on other, and then I want to go down to input 1, expand that and put that into input 1R. And then I'm going to take the green channel and bring it up to here again, click on other. Now, because of the final result, I only want to be exporting the R channel into the displacement shader. I'm going to take the green channel into the red channel of the input. So let's go to input 2 and plug that into input 2R. So we can see that those are both going into R there. Final one, blue again up to here, other, input 3, and input 3R. Okay, and again, it's good to name this, so let's call this just forehead. And if you come into your layers here, we need to turn on layer 2 and layer 3, and we can name layer 1 displace, name layer 2 tertiary, and then layer 3 micro. So then let's plug this into the displacement shader and see what we get at this stage. So I'm just going to take the red channel, which is why I plugged everything into only the red channel here. So I'm going to take that and put that into displacement. And let's do a quick render to see what we get. Okay, so we can see here that the displacement is isolated to the forehead only, which is exactly what we wanted. Obviously the levels are way out at the moment and he looks a bit like a Klingon. So if we go back into the hypershade, and we can look at quickly editing that. So what I'm going to do is turn on each layer separately. So I will put all of these to 0. And then if we go one by one, I will set layer 1 to about 0.15. And when the render refreshes, we should see that we're starting to get just the displacement layer on the model there. Layer 2, which is a tertiary, is again set that to 0.15. And when the render refreshes, we should start seeing some of that tertiary detail in there. Which we are, so we can see it's working well. And then finally the micro, again set to 0.15. And we'll start to get that micro detail coming into the render. Cool. One thing I do like to do is switch the operation mode to plus. I think it gives it preserves a little bit more of the detail and gives a slightly sharper result. So let's do that now. Don't need to do it for layer 1, just for layer 2 and layer 3. So you can see it's just a slightly sharper result, which I prefer, and preserves a bit more of the detail. Great, so we know that's working. Let's stop this and close down the IPR render so it doesn't slow things down. And start hooking up the other 2 regions as well. So I'm going to collapse this down to keep it out of the way. And we're going to do the same process here. So I'll collapse this down as well and put in a layer RGBA node again. And this time we get the inputs, which is great. I'm going to expand this out and expand the out color here. And I'm also going to expand these as well to expose the channels. I'm going to take the red channel and plug it into the red channel of the input. Green channel again goes into the red channel of the input. And then blue channel, we do have to go up here, click on other, expand input 3 here and input 3R. Let's just expand that out so we can see it clearly. And then this one I'm going to call nose. And again, want to go in here, click enable to turn these 2 layers on. Name them again. And set these to set layer 2 and layer 3 to plus. And we know from a previous one that 0.15 was a fairly good value, so let's start with that. And then we can move on to the cheeks. So let's collapse this down. And drop another layer RGBA node. Expand the out color there, expand input 1 and input 2. And again, red into red, green into input 2 red, and blue up here, other, and input 3, red. And we'll call this cheeks. And I didn't actually name this one here. So. And then again, we'll come up and enable those two layers, switch them to plus, and name everything correctly. And we'll put in about 0.15 again. Okay, great. So those two are set up, but now we need to merge them together to put them into the displacement node. Now, the thing is with layer RGBA node is that it has a maximum of 8 inputs. So how you merge all these together is kind of up to you, really. You can have one layer RGBA node to merge these 3 in together and have that as the ID mask 1 merge. Or you could use one for 2 of these, which would make 6. But you're going to need at least 2 to merge everything together and then take it through. Just for cleanliness, I'm going to use 1 for each ID mask. So I'm going to put another layer RGBA node here. I'm going to call this ID1 merge. And then what I need to do, let's expand these out. So I'm going to expand these 2 out. And again, we're only exporting the red channel. So I'm going to take red channel from here, put that into input 1R, red channel from here, put that into input 2R, and then expand this, take red channel from here and put that into input 3R. So now collapse all this down just to make everything a little bit tidier. And then of course we need to enable these 2 layers. And in order for them to work, they need to be set to plus in this case. And then from the out color, we can take out color R and plug that directly into the displacement. So again, let's do a render and see what we're getting now. So now we're getting displacement working correctly on the head, on the nose and the cheeks. And its levels look good. Obviously you will want to set these levels with subsurface scattering on so that you're getting a more accurate representation of how they're going to look in final result. So what we need to do is continue adding in each zone for the lips, chin, all these other areas that currently have no displacement on. So I'm going to stop the IPR render and then come back into my hypershade. And what we need to do is replicate the node setup that we have for ID mask 1 for all of the other ID masks. Okay, so I've gone ahead and set up all of the remaining ID masks exactly the same way as we did before. And one thing to point out is that I have correctly named everything all the way through here. It means that if someone else needs to pick this up after you, or even you coming back to it after a period of time, it's much easier to understand what is controlling what, basically, and also to troubleshoot things. So if a particular region isn't working, I can come into these merges and see that layer 3 here is the ears and check my settings. Same here, I have everything properly named. So we have nose, cheeks, forehead. And it's just really good to get into this habit of working this way. What we need to do now is merge these 4 together and then output that to the displacement shader. And surprise, surprise, I'm going to use a layer RGBA. So let's press tab, put down another layer RGBA, drop it in here, and we'll just call this merge. I will expand these slightly. I'm going to delete this connection here. And then again, the only channel that we need to take from all of these is the red channel. So I'm going to click on here, out color R, plug that into input 1 R. Same here, out color R, plug that into input 2 R. Out color R, bring that out to here, click other, and come down to input 3 and input 3 R. And then finally, for ID4, out color R, up to here, other, input 4 and input 4 R. So I'm just going to expand that so it's a little clearer. So I can see they're all just going into the red channel. Now, again, we need to enable these channels. They have to be set to plus, else it won't work. And let's name these. So this first one will be ID1. Second one is ID2. Third one is ID3. And then finally ID4. And then we can expand this out color here and take the R channel straight into displacement. So let's do a render and see how that looks. Okay, great. So now we've got displacement working across the entire model in all the areas. And we have a shader that enables us to edit that per region, per channel. So I'm just going to bring this over here. So for instance, the tip of the nose, that information may actually be getting doubled up due to the nature of the IDs. So if we want to bring that down to 0, we can do quite easily just by inputting 0 here into all 3 channels. And we can see we're getting a softer result on that nose tip there. Maybe the director wants the lips to have a bit more shape to them. So let's come to lips. And initially, we might just want to increase the displacement layer. So let's put that to 0.25. So now we're boosting the displacement layer just in the lips there. Maybe the tertiary is a bit strong in the cheeks. So we can come into cheeks and set tertiary to 0.1. And again, he'll re-render. So this method gives us a really extreme level of control over the displacement. Now, one thing to chat about quickly is where we set the strength of each channel. For instance, you could come up to this AI multiply knowing that 0.15 is roughly in the ballpark of where we want it and set this input to be 0.15. And that's completely legitimate, but I prefer to set it here because if I set this to 0.5 and all of these to 1, then anything that I'm doing here is a multiplier of that 0.15. So I need to go to much more extremes to get differences at this stage. It's much clearer to me and much easier for me to just work out in my head to be setting the strength here. Similarly, you could use this as a global multiplier for just ID1 and ID2, but I think there's an argument for just keeping it to these, even though it is slightly more complex to go in and edit each area separately. I think it just is a little bit cleaner to work that way. Great, so last thing to do is talk about adding in a sculpt layer displacement. So in the previous video, I edited the head model in ZBrush by adding some TexturingXYZ logos to various parts of his face. And I showed how to export the displacement map from there and the reasons why I use those settings. And then I exported the model so that any differences in vertex position would be correct in my Maya scene. So I would recommend you go back to that video and watch that if you haven't already for that process. And first thing I'm going to do here is replace this head with the one with the edits in. So I shall delete that and then import the new head with the changed vertex positions. So here he is. You can see here that we have some very blocky impressions of a TexturingXYZ logo. So first thing I want to do is click on it, right click, assign existing material and apply the skin. Second thing is we just need to make sure that our subdivision settings are correct. So in the attribute editor under Arnold, we want to come down to subdivision and set this to cat Clark. Iterations will go at 5 and adaptive error at about 2. And then we should be good to go. If we render this now, we can see that we are getting the modified vertex positions, but these TexturingXYZ logos are very blurry and very soft. So we need to bring in the displacement to support these. So let's stop this and come into the Hypershade editor. Now previously I used an add node, but because we've got this layer RGB merge node here that's merging all these together, we can just use this now. So I'm going to bring in the map first of all. So again, we can just click and drag this into the Hypershade editor. And we can see here a preview of it with the logos applied. So much like at the top here, we just need to do the same process. Let's put in an AI subtract. Take the out color from here into input 1. And then input 2, we want to set to 0.5. So it's subtracting 0.5 from the overall image and giving us a mid value of 0. Let's give it a global multiply. So out into input 1, input 2 can be left at 1. And then the out color, we want to take the R channel and bring this up to here, click other, and then we want input 5 into the R. And then we can come into here, expand layer 5, click enable, put this to plus, and let's call this sculpt displacement. And then we can do another render to see how that's working. There we go, there's the model with that sculpt displacement applied. So you can see all his logos working nice and sharp and correctly. And so what we're left with is a very versatile displacement shader where I can control any region I need to, and the strength of displacement in there, and bring in a sculpt layer as well. Obviously this takes a little longer to set up, but if you want maximum flexibility in your shader, then this is a good way to go about it. Thank you for watching. There's lots more help and tutorials on the TexturingXYZ VFace website, and we're adding new content all the time. My name is Amy Ash. I'm currently head of characters at Axis Studios in Glasgow. Again, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time.